I'm James Scholes, the Director of Education Policy at the Show Me Institute, and I apologize we went a little long in the first section, so I'm going to try to move us along. What's going to go on now is we're going to have a presentation of some poll numbers that the Freedmen Foundation conducted for the Show Me Institute. So Paul DePerna, the Research Director at the Freedmen Foundation, will be presenting these poll numbers. The official poll results will come out on May 6th. We'll be issuing the full research on that at that time, but he'll be giving you a snapshot, a preview right now. And so without further ado, I'll have Paul, and then right afterwards we'll have our legislators that are part of the panel come down, and we'll have a discussion about the possibility of school choice in Missouri. So here's Paul DePerna.
My name is Paul DePerna. I'm the Research Director for the Freedmen Foundation for Educational Choice. And before I get started, I would like to thank James Scholes and the Show Me Institute for the invitation to speak and present some of the survey data that we'll get into in a few minutes, and also express an appreciation for holding this type of an event, to express that appreciation to Show Me and the Hammond Institute for Free Enterprise. So quickly, just to give you a little bit of information about the Freedmen Foundation, we're based in Indianapolis. We were established in 1996 by Milton Friedman and his wife, Rose Director Friedman. Milton Friedman, as many of you know, received the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 1976. School choice was a very special issue to them, especially in their later years. And they established the Freedmen Foundation in Indy almost 20 years ago, and we're a nonpartisan nonprofit. We do work, even though we're based in Indiana, we work and provide services to partners in over 30 states in any given year. We've had a nice long relationship with the Show Me Institute going back as long as I've been there. I've been there since 2006. And our core functions and what we do are outreach, research, and advocacy. So to just get into the Missouri survey, the data collection was conducted by Braun Research. They're based out of Princeton, New Jersey. They do a lot of work for Gallup, Pew Research. They've done work for the Washington Post, various federal agencies. They have a very good reputation in the polling and survey research industry. We've been working with them for about 5 or 6 years. This is, I think, the 23rd state poll that we've conducted together. This survey was conducted in end of February and March, from February 27th to March 11th. The average interview length was about 14 minutes, which is about typical for our state polls. The sample frame was registered voters here in Missouri. And we collected 660 interviews statewide in Missouri, and that enabled us to get about 220. We interviewed 227 voters in the St. Louis metro area. We also had about 165 interviews for the Kansas City metro area, and that includes an oversample above and beyond the statewide. So we wanted to try to get at least, we were shooting to get at least about 150 interviews in Kansas City. The response rate was 9.7% for the landline phone calls and 8.3% for the cell phone, which is the industry standard these days. And we did weight the poll to correct for any known demographic inconsistencies. We try to compare our unweighted sample characteristics with the U.S. Census Bureau statistics. So when we do our polls and in this full report that'll be published in a couple weeks, when I write up the results, we focus on a lot of the levels of support and opposition to various issues. So levels are very important to think about. It's an important metric. Also, margins indicate likelihood to oppose or to support a particular policy or issue. Intensities are taking the extreme responses, so those who say strongly favor and strongly oppose, or strongly support and strongly oppose. The difference between the two can indicate an intensity. Gallup often reports these with their survey publications. And then just looking at the mins and max, the minimums and maximums, when looking at demographic characteristics, you really do see a range and a variety of support or opposition to a lot of these issues that we interviewed on. So we typically, in our surveys, it's really, you can break it up into thirds. So the first third is roughly, we go from a very general kind of type of interviewing where we are asking about the direction of K-12 education in the state, the quality of the public school system. We ask respondents to grade the local schools in their area, the public schools, private schools, charter schools. We ask them about what is their preferred school type among those, charter, private, public. And then that's the first third. And then we get a little bit more specific and much more policy oriented in the middle section of the interview, where we are talking specifically about school choice policies. And so we asked questions, and we had an emphasis on tax credit scholarships here for this Missouri poll. And so we asked questions about tax credit scholarships, school vouchers, education savings accounts, charter schools, and then we also, and this was really, it was a great help from talking in discussions with James and Show Me, the importance of having some questions about this interdistrict, the student transfer policy for those districts who lose their accreditation, and the impact it has on those students in those districts and when they can transfer to adjoining districts. So we asked a couple questions about student transfers. So it's helpful, I think a little bit, it is especially helpful for me living in Indiana, just to take a snapshot of where, what are kind of the vital statistics of Missouri K-12 education. And so you can see, just to add some further context behind these interviews and responses. And so looking at, so the National Assessment for Educational Progress is a federal exam that's given every 2 years to random samples in every state. It allows for state-to-state comparisons. Looking at that, you can see that Missouri is about in the middle of the pack. It's looking at the 4th and 8th grade math and reading scores. The average state rank is 28 out of 50. The high school graduation rate is almost 84% of the 4-year high school graduation rate. It's helpful to know there are roughly 1 million students in the K-12 universe, 900,000 attending regular public schools. You have about 18,000 in charter schools, and then about 93,000 in the private schools. We don't have good data, unfortunately, on homeschool students, and that's pretty typical in any given state. I know in Indiana we don't have reliable data on homeschooling. And so the percentages break out this way. 89% of students are in regular public schools. The vast majority, 9 out of 10 students in the state are going to regular public schools. Almost 2% are in charter schools, and just over 9% are in the private schools. So you can see here, it's just the lay of the land, and it helps those of us who don't live here just to get a better sense of where things are right now. And the size of schooling in Missouri. So going into the items in the survey, we asked, what do voters say about the direction and quality of K-12 education in Missouri? And you can see that it's negative. I mean, in a nutshell, it's negative, where 37% believe that K-12 education's going in the right direction. Almost 6 out of 10 here in the state think that it's gotten off on the wrong track. It's a little more negative, as you can see. The bottom 2 bars are the St. Louis and Kansas City breakouts. And you can see almost 2/3 of the respondents from St. Louis believe that K-12 education's gotten off on the wrong track. And it's just about 1/3, a little less than 1/3, who believe it's going in the right direction. So we asked, how can you rate the public school system in the state? And this is a scale of excellent, good, fair, and poor. And 4 out of 10 would say good or excellent, and almost 6 out of 10 would say fair or poor. So it's still, you pick up this negative sentiment among respondents. So we get into questions about we ask questions about how would you grade the local schools in your area on assign them an A to F grade, and how would you grade the local district schools, private schools, and charter schools? And the raw responses, you can see these first two shades of blue, I don't know how well you can see in the back, 42% would give an A or B to the public schools, 35% to charter schools, and 63% would give an A or B to private schools. But you can see over on this far end, these last black segments indicate non-responses, or they either said, I don't know, or this really doesn't apply to our local area, so I'll pass on this question, and we offered that opportunity. And you can see, I mean, relatively small, 5% wouldn't give a grade to the public schools, but you see much higher percentages for charters and private schools. So if these folks didn't have a charter school in their area, they would just say it does not apply. Likewise for private schools. So almost 4 out of 10, 42% did not grade charter schools. A quarter would not grade the private schools. So what happens when we take these non-responses out of the picture and we just look at the percent of those giving a grade A to F? And it looks much different. You see 45% would still give an A or B to public schools, but then you would have 61% giving an A or B to charters. And you see here for private schools, I mean, there is this very positive association of private schooling for those who gave a grade, where it's 84% would give an A or B to private schools. No one gave a D or F to the private schools. So you can see there's a range here and variation among school type. We followed up these grade questions with a question about if it was your decision and you could select any type of school, what type of school would you select in order to obtain the best education for your child? And this top bar reflect responses. So 32%, a third, would choose a regular public school, 11% charter, plurality of 39% would choose a private school, and then 10% would choose homeschooling. And that's the homeschooling might surprise some folks, but this has been a pretty consistent finding, where we see generally 10%, give or take a few percentage points, would choose to homeschool, all other things being equal. So there's a great variety here and diversity of schooling options that people want. And then this bar beneath it, actually, this shows the actual enrollment patterns right here in Missouri right now. And so you can see just this huge difference, where almost 9 out of 10, like we had mentioned before, are attending regular public schools. That's almost 60 percentage points greater than what we pick up in the survey. 9% are going to private schools, and that's significantly lower than the private preferences expressed in our survey interviews. So there just seems like there's a gaping disconnect between respondents and voters' private preferences that they shared with us in our interviews, and the way the structure of schooling is set up here in Missouri, as well as other states too. It just doesn't allow for this kind of freedom or mobility to go to the preferred school type. We followed up this question with just what is the important characteristic for why you chose such and such a school. And so by far, you can see the first and third responses reflect better education, quality of education, academics. These are not percentages. These are just impressions, counts of the responses to this question. And so this is really just suggestive, but you can see academics, curriculum, better education is definitely the most important feature of a school for the reason why they would choose a school. But then we see some others that are, as we've seen in other states, are consistently in the top 5 or so, but they have different ordering. But you can see individual attention or one-on-one attention is also very important to people as the most important reason why they would choose a school. Teaching is very important. Socialization, also a very important feature for a reason to choose a school. So there are other reasons, even though academics and education, quality of education, is clearly the most important reason, or stated by the plurality of respondents, you can see there are other reasons why someone may want to choose a different type of school, whether that's private, public, charter. So now we get into the school choice questions, and particularly the tax credit scholarship questions. And so what do voters say about tax credit scholarships? 2/3 of respondents to our survey said they would favor a tax credit scholarship system. And the way we define a tax credit scholarship system in the survey, we first introduced tax credit concept and say tax credit allows an individual or business to reduce the final amount of tax owed to the government. Some states give tax credits to individuals and businesses if they contribute money to nonprofit organizations, these STOs and SGOs that we were talking about earlier, that Jonathan and Jason were talking about earlier. A tax credit scholarship system allows parents the option of sending their child to the school of their choice, whether public or private, including religious and non-religious schools. So this is a pretty expansive, basic definition of a tax credit scholarship system. 2/3, 67% favor. That's roughly the same in St. Louis and Kansas City. And just over a quarter say they would oppose a tax credit scholarship. So this is impossible for most of you to read. So I'll just point, these are the demographic breakouts on this question. And this column here is just the favor percentage. Second column is the oppose. And then we have the metrics I like to point out, especially when talking about demographics, are the margins, which indicate likelihood to support or likelihood to oppose such an issue. It's just the difference between favor and oppose responses. And the net for the state was plus 40. So there were, by 40 percentage points, people were more likely to say they support rather than oppose. That's huge. The intensity, which is taking the strongly positive and the strongly negative I mentioned earlier, it's plus 16. That's pretty large. In St. Louis and Kansas City, it's a little bit different. The margins are 32, plus 32 in St. Louis, plus 36 in Kansas City. It's interesting to see Kansas City, the intensity was plus 23, as opposed to plus 8 in St. Louis and plus 16 for the state overall. It's a very popular idea among school parents, plus 46 margin for school parents, plus 56 for small town voters, which actually that was a little bit surprising. Usually we see generally a little more support among urban areas than we do in the small town and rural areas. So that was interesting to see small town having such a high margin. Among Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, they're all over plus 30 on the margin metric. It's plus 57 for Republicans. It's very popular among young voters, and this is a pretty consistent finding from state to state, where we see young voters very supportive of school choice policies across the board, particularly tax credit scholarships and education savings accounts. 80% of those age 18 to 34 supported tax credit scholarships. Just 17% said they opposed. So that's a net margin of plus 63, and the intensity is pretty large, plus 21, which is larger than the statewide average. Also very popular among low-income voters. So the margin's plus 49 for low-income voters. Tax credit scholarships across the board positive, but you definitely see some variation among demographic groups. So we asked them a question about interdistrict student transfers as it relates to here, the situation in Missouri. And so it was 2-to-1 support. 60% supported the student transfer policy. After a district loses its accreditation, students who live in that district can switch to or transfer to another accredited district. So 60% supported, 30% opposed. Roughly, these are all within the margins of error for the poll. So St. Louis and Kansas City, for the most part, look pretty similar to the statewide average. So quickly, just to wrap up, the levels of support you see highest for tax credit scholarships at 67%. Charter schools, which we didn't get into, but we did ask a couple questions about charters, 64%. So those two separated themselves as garnering the highest support among the school choice policies that we had asked about. And the margins also plus 40 for both of those, charters and tax credit scholarships. And then you can see it was plus 30 for vouchers, as well as for interdistrict student transfers, almost at 28 for ESAs. So just takeaways, Missourians are negative right now about the quality and direction of K-12 education in the state. There's a major disconnect between what survey respondents said is their school type preference versus the actual enrollment patterns in the state. Private schools are viewed very positively among respondents. And there's broad support across the board for school choice policies with some separation for tax credit scholarships and charter schools at the top. Just say thank you very much.
Hooking you off. Thank you.